If he succeeds in getting Caligula declared obscene, the theater owner who showed that movie could find himself under arrest.
What if I told you that Peter O'Toole once starred in a movie so outrageous it was banned in countries around the world? The scenes were so explicit, some cast members begged to have their names removed, and over 100 crew members refused to take credit. This one role turned a Hollywood star into an outsider and sparked chaos both on and off the set. But what happened on that set? And why did this film nearly destroy him? Let's get into the full story. Peter O'Toole was born on August 2nd, 1932, in Leeds, Yorkshire. Or at least that's what one of his birth certificates says. The other claims he was born in Ireland. Even Peter himself wasn't sure which one was true, adding a sense of mystery to his early life. His mother, Constance Jane Elliott, was a Scottish nurse, while his father, Patrick Joseph Spats O'Toole, was an Irish bookmaker. Their life was far from settled. When Peter was just a year old, the family began traveling from town to town across northern England, following his father's work at major race courses. They eventually settled in Hunslet, a working-class suburb, where Peter and his sister Patricia grew up in a Catholic household. School was memorable, especially the nuns at St. Joseph's Secondary School. Peter later said they terrified him. Their black habits and shaved heads made a haunting impression that stuck with him for years, even shaping his future performances. At 14, Peter left school and started working as a copy boy at the Yorkshire Evening Post. He loved words and storytelling, and the job seemed like a good fit. But it didn't last long. During this time, he honed skills that would later help him as an actor, watching people, noticing small details, and understanding human nature. His journalism career was cut short when he was called up for national service in the Royal Navy. While serving as a signaller, a life-changing moment occurred. An officer casually asked him what he'd always wanted to do. Peter answered without hesitation. He wanted to be either a poet or an actor. That simple response set the stage for his journey into acting. In 1952, Peter tried to join Dublin's Abbey Theatre Drama School, but was rejected because he didn't speak Irish. Undeterred, he applied to the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London and won a scholarship. His classmates included future legends like Albert Finney and Alan Bates, a group Peter later described as the most remarkable class the Academy ever had. Though they were seen as eccentric at the time, they would go on to redefine acting. At RADA, Peter's rebellious nature sometimes clashed with the rigid traditions of the school, but his classical training built a strong foundation for his career. After graduating, Peter joined the Bristol Old Vic, where he spent 3 years performing in about 70 plays. This period transformed him as an actor. His Shakespearean roles, in particular, were groundbreaking. His portrayal of Hamlet at the Bristol Old Vic became legendary, even catching the attention of Laurence Olivier. Olivier was so impressed that he invited Peter to reprise the role for the National Theatre's first production in 1963. During these years, Peter developed his own style, blending traditional training with a bold, contemporary edge. His big break came in 1962 when he starred in Lawrence of Arabia, a role he almost didn't get. Marlon Brando had turned it down, and director David Lean happened to see O'Toole in a smaller film, The Day They Robbed the Bank of England. Captivated by his talent, Lean cast him as T.E. Lawrence. Filming was a grueling experience. Over 14 months in the desert, O'Toole endured scorching heat, injuries like third-degree burns, broken bones, and even a deviated spine. But despite the pain, he never missed a single day of shooting. Off-set, O'Toole and co-star Omar Sharif would escape to Beirut, where their wild parties often ended with both actors in jail. His dedication to the role went beyond the camera. He spent 700 hours learning to ride camels before filming. Noel Coward famously joked after seeing the movie, "If you had been any prettier, the film would have been called Florence of Arabia." But it was his role in Caligula that changed everything for O'Toole. He took on the role of Tiberius in after Orson Welles turned down the part, even though it would have been his highest-paying job at $1 million. O'Toole was in a fragile state when he joined the production. He was reportedly high as a kite during the entire shoot, and his condition seemed to shape his portrayal of the depraved emperor. The character was shown with advanced venereal diseases and participating in degrading acts, including shocking sex shows with deformed performers. This made it one of the most controversial performances in cinema history. And some critics believe his fragile state actually added depth to the character's twisted nature. The film brought together an extraordinary cast, but their time on set was far from harmonious. Malcolm McDowell, fresh off his success in A Clockwork Orange, clashed with O'Toole during intense scenes, especially the infamous pool scenes with naked youths. Helen Mirren, who described the entire production as feeling like an acid trip, spent months filming only to appear for a brief 20 minutes in the final cut. Sir John Gielgud, another distinguished cast member, reportedly never even watched the finished movie. Maria Schneider, originally cast as Drusilla, walked off the project after being uncomfortable with the explicit sexual content, leading to Teresa Ann Savoy taking over the role. Tensions among the cast peaked during Tiberius's death scene, where McDowell later admitted he was genuinely terrified by O'Toole's intensity. The film's original vision, written by Gore Vidal, was a completely different story. Vidal had been paid $200,000 to write a script focusing on the political corruption and power struggles in ancient Rome, drawing parallels to modern politics. His version highlighted Caligula's rise to power and explored themes of homosexuality, which Vidal saw as central to the story. The script included multiple gay relationships and only one heterosexual scene between Caligula and his sister Drusilla. Vidal described Caligula as a nice, happy boy and compared him to Andy Hardy in a toga. However, producer Bob Guccione demanded major rewrites, fearing audiences wouldn't accept such bold content. Vidal's serious political drama was completely abandoned, and he eventually distanced himself from the project. As the production went on, chaos took over. The $17.5 million project became infamous for its behind-the-scenes scandals. Without informing director Tinto Brass or the main cast, Guccione secretly filmed explicit pornographic scenes using penthouse models on the original sets. These additional scenes were meant to appeal to a wider audience, but only added to the film's notoriety. The editing process became a disaster, lasting 3 years, during which Brass was locked out of the editing room entirely. The film faced multiple lawsuits, with several cast members demanding their names be removed from the credits. Over 100 crew members asked to remain uncredited, not wanting to be associated with the final product. Brass disowned the movie, and Vidal also sued to have his name removed. When the film was released, it was banned in many countries, and some of those bans lasted well into the 21st century. The chaos surrounding the production overshadowed everything else, turning it into one of the most controversial projects in film history. And it was one of the worst projects for Peter O'Toole. But even more worst was his drinking habits. At one New Year's Eve party at his home in Hampstead, he set a tone like no other. Guests were told that behaviors like fornication, madness, murder, drunkenness, shouting, shrieking, leaping, polite conversation, and the breaking of bones were all welcome. The only rule? No acting allowed. His life was a whirlwind of outrageous adventures. He once climbed the side of Lloyd's Bank while drunk and even set himself on fire while sleeping. One night, he got on a train at King's Cross simply because it was the only place still serving drinks. The train took him to Leeds, where he ended up throwing stones at a stranger's window to ask for a place to stay. Surprisingly, the elderly homeowner let him in, and O'Toole stayed for 3 days. His drinking escapades often involved other famous actors. His friendship with Richard Burton led to some of the most notorious stories in Hollywood. After a dinner with Michael Caine, they woke up 2 days later in an unfamiliar location, banned for life from the restaurant. The owner refused to tell them what had happened. During the filming of Lawrence of Arabia, O'Toole and his co-star Omar Sharif, whom he lovingly called Cairo Fred, went on a wild night in Beirut. They got so drunk that O'Toole tried to pay for services at what turned out to be a nunnery. That same night, they managed to gamble away 9 months of their film wages in a single visit to a casino, despite Sharif claiming to have a foolproof system. By the 1970s, O'Toole's drinking had reached dangerous levels. He was consuming a bottle of whiskey a day, actually modest compared to Richard Burton, who reportedly drank 3 bottles of vodka daily. But the toll on O'Toole's health was severe. During stage performances, he often needed medical help between scenes. In one performance of Hamlet, he was so drunk that he forgot to remove his horn-rimmed glasses after checking the racing forms backstage. Noel Coward, sitting in the audience, couldn't help but laugh loudly. By the mid-1970s, Peter O'Toole's legendary drinking finally pushed him to the brink. While filming Man Friday, he collapsed on set, overwhelmed by excruciating abdominal pain. Rushed to surgery, doctors made a grim discovery. His pancreas had been completely destroyed from years of heavy drinking. The damage was so severe that they had to remove large sections of his intestines as well. When O'Toole woke up, he was skeletal, his once vibrant frame wasted away. The warning was as dire as it gets. If he had even one more drink, it would kill him instantly. This terrifying diagnosis came at the worst possible time. He was set to take on the role of Emperor Caligula in what would become one of the most controversial films of his career. In the hospital, he received a visit from his old drinking buddy, Richard Harris. Seeing O'Toole so fragile and broken brought Harris to tears, and he swore to give up alcohol himself. A promise he sadly couldn't keep for long. For O'Toole, though, there was no choice. His body simply couldn't handle another drop. The transition to sobriety wasn't just difficult, it was pure agony. O'Toole had been drinking so heavily for so long that quitting unleashed severe withdrawal symptoms. He experienced vivid hallucinations, at one point spending hours talking to a tree he believed was Humphrey Bogart. The man who once joked about drinking himself across entire countries now couldn't even walk into a pub. His weight plummeted to a shocking 130 pounds, and he suffered from relentless insomnia. Night after night, he wandered the streets of London until dawn, desperate to tire himself out enough to sleep. Forced to abandon alcohol but still in constant pain from his ruined pancreas, O'Toole turned to cannabis. In typical fashion, he approached it with unrestrained enthusiasm. During the filming of Caligula, his co-star Helen Mirren recalled finding him in his trailer, chain-smoking marijuana and completely lost in his own world. His doctors admitted that if he hadn't turned to marijuana, he would have had to rely on morphine, an addiction that could have been just as destructive. O'Toole used cannabis to manage his pain for years, finding a way to stay creative and functional while his body slowly adjusted to a new reality. By the early 1980s, he had finally found a fragile balance between sobriety, pain relief, and the irrepressible spirit that defined him. Peter O'Toole's marriage to Sian Phillips began like a scene from a movie. They first met on a London street in the 1950s, and Phillips felt certain she would marry him. Their early days together in Belgravia were filled with drama. O'Toole's jealous streak appeared quickly. He once threw her entire Hollywood-funded wardrobe out of the window, forcing her to wear his oversized trousers and fisherman's sweaters for 6 months. Despite the tension, they married in 1959. However, their relationship was far from happy. O'Toole's controlling behavior and struggles with alcoholism overshadowed their lives. After their first daughter, Kate, was born in 1960, O'Toole demanded Phillips give up her acting career, even though Hollywood kept offering her roles. His jealousy became obsessive. He insulted her over past relationships and would intentionally get drunk to destroy their home whenever she found professional success. The effects of O'Toole's behavior were deeply felt within their family. After Kate was born, O'Toole left to film Lawrence of Arabia and didn't return for 2 years. He finally saw her again on her second birthday in Seville. Their second daughter, Patricia, became so detached from her father that she once asked her mother, "Who is that nice man?" when he visited her in the hospital. Life at home had no routine. Each year was unpredictable, shaped by O'Toole's larger-than-life personality, but also by his destructive habits. By 1975, the pressure became unbearable. After O'Toole nearly died from pancreatitis and insisted on working in Mexico against doctors' advice, Phillips left him for actor Robert Sachs. Their divorce was finalized in 1979, and O'Toole never spoke to Phillips again. Even when they passed each other on the street, he ignored her. Despite their turbulent relationship, both O'Toole and Phillips maintained a certain public grace. Phillips rarely spoke about their marriage and remained protective of O'Toole's legacy. When she did talk about him, she described trying to understand him as like holding sand in my hand. He was trickling through my fingers all the time. Even after their bitter separation, O'Toole continued to support their daughters, though his relationship with Patricia remained strained. He left her nothing in his will, a reflection of their ongoing distance. Peter O'Toole's career had its share of ups and downs, but his comeback in The Stuntman, 1980, was nothing short of remarkable. He played Eli Cross, a manipulative film director, in a role that almost didn't happen. The film took 9 years to get financing, rejected by every major studio along the way. Director Richard Rush refused to replace O'Toole, even when studios demanded a safer actor. That decision paid off in spectacular fashion. O'Toole's performance was captivating and earned him his 6th Oscar nomination. The film became a critical success, boasting a 91% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and winning the Grand Prix at the Montreal World Film Festival. In 1982, O'Toole delivered what many consider his best comedic performance in My Favorite Year. He played Alan Swan, a character inspired by Errol Flynn, an aging movie star grappling with his own struggles. For O'Toole, the role hit close to home. Like Swan, he had battled alcoholism and faced career setbacks. Filming the movie sober for the first time in decades gave his portrayal a raw, authentic quality. The film was a huge success, earning him his 7th Oscar nomination and a stellar 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. O'Toole performed all his stunts, including a heart-stopping scene where he dangled from the GE building at Rockefeller Center, 40 stories above the ground. The scene was shot at 3 a.m. to avoid crowds, and despite being 50 years old at the time, O'Toole's daring effort left audiences and critics in awe. Even Errol Flynn's daughter thanked him for so perfectly capturing her father's essence. After My Favorite Year, O'Toole continued to prove his versatility. In Masada, 1981, He played the Roman general Lucius Flavius Silva, earning an Emmy nomination. He took on the controversial role of Tiberius in Caligula, though he later distanced himself from the project. Decades later, in 2004, he stunned audiences in Troy, playing King Priam. Despite sharing the screen with stars like Brad Pitt, O'Toole stole every scene he was in. His final Oscar-nominated performance came in Venus, 2006, where he played an aging actor falling for a young woman. At 74, he became the oldest Best Actor nominee in history, a testament to his enduring talent. In 2003, the Academy offered O'Toole an honorary Oscar to celebrate his lifetime achievements. At first, he resisted, famously writing to the Academy asking them to wait until he was 80, saying, "I'm still in the game and might win the bugger outright." Eventually, his children convinced him to accept. His acceptance speech was unforgettable. With wit and charm, he joked, "Always a bridesmaid, never a bride, my foot." The speech lasted exactly 7 minutes and 47 seconds, during which he fondly remembered his late friends Richard Harris and Richard Burton. The honorary Oscar recognized his record-breaking 8 Best Actor nominations without a win, a record he shares with Glenn Close. In 2012, at the age of 79, O'Toole announced his retirement with his usual eloquence, saying, "The heart for it has gone out of me. It won't come back." This marked the end of a career that had spanned decades. O'Toole left an indelible mark on cinema. Critics marveled at his distinct voice, described as a rapier that has been used to stir the cream. Beyond his iconic roles, O'Toole inspired generations of actors with his meticulous preparation, artistic courage, and unshakable dedication to his craft. On December 14, 2013, Peter O'Toole passed away at Wellington Hospital in London after battling stomach cancer. His daughter, Kate, organized a heartfelt memorial filled with music and laughter, just as he would have wanted. His funeral, held on December 20th, was attended by famous figures like Sting and his ex-wife, Sian Phillips. In a poetic final gesture, his ashes were first kept in the Irish presidential mansion before being returned to his birthplace in Connemara, Ireland, fulfilling his wish to go back home.